Radio Vermont Group. We welcome listener feedback. Email your comments to wdev@radiovermont.com.
The teams you care about.
Mac Jones is good. That's not the question. The question is he good enough to win repeatedly in this loaded AFC?
The stories that matter to you.
If I'm Xander Bogaerts, I need 3 things in order to get over that insulting contract offer.
This is your home for New England sports.
Jason Tatum, superstar. Book it.
This is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday to you on the Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV AM and FM and WDEVradio.com. It is a glorious day because we're back at it for a full 90 minutes today. Actually, we're going a little beyond 90 minutes. I'm so excited to have a full show. Red Sox baseball begins at 7:10 today. Sox against the Astros. So we're just going to roll through until 7:10. Okay? We're going to roll through until 7:10. We're going to play the 7 o'clock news update, and then we're going to come back and talk for a few more minutes. So I'm pumped. All week long, we're going to have full shows and late shows. So happy to have you along for the ride. Red Sox and Astros getting a 3-game series in Houston. Final time we'll see the Astros this year. Red Sox will be there Monday through Wednesday before moving on to Kansas City. We'll discuss the impending trade deadline, the crazy deals that have already happened. The Yankees acquiring Frankie Montas is just nice. Just a nice knife to the heart there of the Red Sox season. We're going to talk about the Patriots with Mark Schofield of NFL Wire and Pat's Pulpit. He'll be with us at about 6:30. I'll tell you about my awful men's league baseball game from yesterday. And yes, I will share the email I got from a group of people who essentially want me fired. And we'll talk a little bit about what their concerns are. We'll open up the floor to the text line. That's the Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line, 802-585-3026. One messenger already says on the text line, whoever wants you fired, let me know. Let me at them. I'll tell you all about who wants me fired at 6 o'clock. So, hey, no time to waste. I got a ton to get to, and I want to tell that story about the email. Seriously.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
The opening thoughts of the Brady Farkas Show brought to you by Sticks and Stuff and Swanton Lumber. They are Vermont's most complete locally owned home center with locations in Enosburg, Derby, Middlesex, St. Albans, and at Swanton Lumber. They're online at sticksandstuff.com. I have a question for the text line. I want to start out with this. Red Sox just finished an awful month of baseball in July. They did not win a series. They got 1 win the entire month from a starting pitcher. It was a horrific month of baseball. How much blame do you put on Alex Cora? That's the question. 802-585-3026. How much blame do you put on Alex Cora for what you just witnessed in July? There's a lot of different people who have a hand in the Red Sox, right? Ownership, Chaim Bloom, Alex Cora, and the players themselves. How much blame do you put on Cora? And the reason why I ask is because I was taken aback by what I heard Mark Dondero of WEEI in Boston say earlier today.
And I put it on the manager and the players in an inability to get out of the rut, more so than the general manager. The general manager has plenty of blame here. Obviously, the pitching isn't good enough. The bullpen, some of the guys we talked about it. But to be a 500 team, in the thick of things, and to find a way for an entire month, and there's 31 full days in July. It's not like it's a short month. To not win one series for a 500 team, absolutely unacceptable. A lot of blame goes on Alex Cora for not being able to figure out how to turn it around.
Alex Cora is getting a lot of blame from Mark Dondero of WEEI in Boston. Is that fair? That's what I ask you, the text line. Is it fair for Alex Cora to get that level of venom and that level of blame for what's transpired for the Red Sox? I believe the Red Sox had 8 wins in the month of July. The Red Sox are now currently out of the playoff race, and I believe the Red Sox should be and will be sellers at the deadline. Is that predicament the fault of Alex Cora? For me, it's not fair to blame Cora in that regard. I don't believe that it's fair. I look at the Red Sox and I believe they ran into a set of circumstances that almost nobody could overcome. And I don't want I don't want injuries to be a cop-out for everything that's gone wrong in 2022. I don't want it to become an excuse that becomes a crutch, because I don't believe that the Red Sox ultimately were a great team this year. But my question is, when you look at this team, where exactly is Alex Cora supposed to turn? Alex Cora lost Trevor Story on July 12th. Rafi Devers was lost for good to the IL on July 23rd, was compromised at other parts of the month earlier than that. JD Martinez has been compromised at various points in July. Michael Wacha, Rich Hill, Chris Sale yet again, Nathan Eovaldi on the injured list. And upon coming back, he hasn't been the same Nathan Eovaldi of last year. Where exactly, if you are Alex Cora, are you supposed to turn? Okay. Everybody has a hand in what happens with the Red Sox. I'm not naive. Cora's a part of it. Ownership's a part of it. Bloom's a part of it. The players are a part of it. But when I start assigning the blame pie, I'm shocked by how much of it Mark Dendero seems to be putting on Alex Cora. I'm looking at this saying, what manager can overcome the loss of his biggest free agent acquisition in Trevor Story, his best overall hitter in Rafi Devers, 4/5 of his starting rotation? Like, almost nobody can overcome this. Alex Cora has been forced out of necessity to play the kids. And while I believe in building the farm system, and while I believe that some of these guys can be good and can be useful, they're not ready to help a team in a playoff race right now. Josh Winkowski's had to pitch more than you'd want him to. Brian Bayo had to come up earlier than you'd want him to. Connor Siebold, the same. Cutter Crawford. Now, Crawford has been good, but all in all, the other guys haven't been that good. Guys who you wouldn't have expected to have to contribute to this roster in a playoff year have had to contribute because of injuries. Tristan Cassis, your top prospect outside of Marcelo Meyer, he's been hurt, can't come up to help. Kike Hernandez has been out. Even Rob Refsnyder now is dealing with an issue. That's a lot to overcome, and I ask you to look around baseball. What manager can overcome all that? Right? Tony La Russa is a Hall of Fame manager with the Chicago White Sox. Hall of Famer. No doubt. Hall of Fame manager. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, they've been out a lot of the season. Lucas Giolito is out for a bit. Lance Lynn's out for a bit. Multiple White Sox bullpen arms have been out all year. I mean, Liam Hendricks has been on the injured list. The White Sox are a team with World Series aspirations, and here they are in the same position as the Red Sox, right around 500. Tony La Russa can't overcome the injury bug. You know that I'm a Mariners fan, right? Mariners are now out, as of yesterday, their best player in Julio Rodriguez. They haven't had Mitch Haniger all year for the most part. And now Ty France, their other all-stars, also compromised. They're going to go to New York and get blasted for 3 games by the Yankees. They just got beat 3 of 4 by the Astros, these same Astros. And they're going to go get swept by the Yankees. And so they're going to be out what? A utility infielder in Dylan Moore, their best player in Julio, and an all-star in France. They're going to be out a handful of players, and they're going to get the floor. They're going to get mopped by the Yankees. Just absolutely mopped. Injuries play a big role in how a team's season goes. Play a huge role. I don't want it to be a crutch because the roster is imperfect. The players have been imperfect. I don't want injuries to be a crutch. But when you look at the month of July, I can't put all the blame on Alex Cora. I just can't. Nobody can overcome what exactly the Red Sox have had to overcome here. Okay? I mean, you're talking about nearly all of your impact players, the Red Sox, being compromised in some way in July. Story, Devers, Bogarts with the nagging shoulder, Sale, Eovaldi, everybody, JD, Devers, they've all been compromised in some way. What exactly is Alex Cora supposed to do? What is Alex Cora supposed to do? I think Cora has struck the right tenor with this team. I think he's done everything he's always done as far as attitude goes. He stayed upbeat for a long time. He didn't put pressure on the kids. I think that's the right thing to do. That didn't work. The comfort level that he created didn't work. Lately, he turned up the rhetoric and talked about how poor the team played. That hasn't worked. Like, short of just blowing a gasket, he's done everything you can do psychologically with this team. He stayed positive. He's pushed them a little bit and turned up the pressure on them. Neither of that has worked. He's tried multiple different tactics. Okay, you can only blow a gasket so many times before you get tuned out. So Cora, it's not like he could just go and yell and throw things all the time and go all Billy Martin. I'm not blaming Alex Cora for what happened in July. I'm more disappointed in the veteran players who, while compromised, were largely healthy and were around the team. Xander Bogaerts, JD Martinez, guys weren't on the injured list. They might have been banged up, but they weren't on the injured list. I wanted them to get out of their comfort zone and rile guys up and rally the troops. They're both quiet. They're both lead by example guys, but I would have liked to see them be more vocal and more out there. As the other team leaders fell away to injury, those guys I wanted to see step up. It's not all their fault either. But a clubhouse and a dugout, they respond to players more than they do the manager just griping at them. I wanted to see, if you're asking me, Bogaerts and Martinez, they're the ones I wanted to see step up. Nick Pivetta, to a degree, he's starting to earn his stripes in that clubhouse. I don't blame Alex Cora a whole lot for what's happened here. Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line 802-585-3026. Ross says, I'm not the happiest with Cora, but there's so many injuries that he can't control it. Roster management is Cora's fault. Roster management is not Cora's fault. I mean, he plays with who he has. What would you like him to do? You don't like Bobby Dahlbeck. Okay. He can't trade him. You don't like Franchi Cordero. Okay. He can't trade him. Christian Arroyo, injured. His super utility guy's been out. Didn't even mention him. Okay, Jarren Duran, you don't like him. Well, where exactly are we going to go? We're going to play JBJ in center all the time who can't hit. You're going to play Ref Snyder all the time who can't hit right. Like, where do you want him to go? Phil says, I blame Cora for penciling in Dahlbeck day after day. Who else? Who else? Alex Cora doesn't call up players. Alex Cora doesn't send players down. Tristan Casas, their top prospect, at first base, injured. He couldn't come up. He couldn't come up and be the answer. Arroyo, you could have put him at first, potentially. He got hurt playing there last year, but he was hurt. Can't put him there. I mean, so who are you going to put there? Christian Vasquez, you could put there more often, as they started to do at the end of the month, I guess. But then you lose him as the catcher, and you're playing Plawecki more. I mean, I don't think this is Cora in many ways. Will over in Plattsburgh, the failure of the Red Sox to beat sub-500 teams proved there's plenty of blame to go around. Also, the Rays and Jays have put together pretty good teams. Yeah, they have. We knew, and I mentioned this on Friday, I think. Last year, the Red Sox getting to the ALCS was actually a detriment to the organization. It was great for the fans. It was fun for the players. It was fun for all of us. But from the organization's building standpoint, that set unreal expectations. This team was never as good as that indicated last year. Last year, they capitalized on a lot of things, right? Injuries to a lot of other teams. Blue Jays not having a home. Red Sox had very good health last year. They had the COVID scare in August and September, but beyond that, they were in incredible health. The Red Sox are not as good. We thought last year they were going to finish fourth. Okay, we thought last year they were going to finish fourth in the division. This is kind of what I expected last year, and last year proved to be an outlier. The Red Sox this year, they're just not as good. They're not as good as the other teams. And I'm going to spend more time on this tomorrow. But you go look at the Yankees. The Yankees just acquired Frankie Montas and Lou Trevino from the A's. Why did the Yankees do that? because the Yankees have the farm system to be able to do it. There's two reasons to develop prospects. One, they come up and help you. And two, they get shipped out for other people. The Yankees can go acquire a Frankie Montas and a Lou Trevino and become dominant because they have a farm system. That is what Chaim Bloom is trying to build. You hate Chaim Bloom. You want him to blow out the farm system at every turn. You can't do that until it's built up sufficiently. I've been watching the Mariners be bad for 3 years, build the farm system, and then they can go pull a deal for Luis Castillo. That is how this is done. That is how this is done. That is what Chaim Bloom is trying to get to. So you see how other teams are building and how the Red Sox need to be building. Peter in Williston, it's not Cora's fault. The roster has been decimated with injuries and suffering a power outage other than Devers, as you correctly pointed out weeks ago. Thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate your support. And maybe Peter doesn't want me fired like those other people do. Again, I'm going to tell that story at about 6:03 today. So after the CBS News update, I'll tell you the story about the people who want me fired. One more text. Lou from St. Albans. Brady, you were right. The Red Sox lost 2 of 3 to the Brewers. You called it. I agree. The Red Sox need to sell. It's just not going to happen this season. Yeah. Right? I did call that the Brewers were going to beat the Red Sox at least 2 out of 3. Now, the Mariners are going through a bunch of injuries. They could fade. The Orioles are going to face the same tough schedule that the Red Sox do, and they just traded Trey Mancini. They could fade. But I think that the White Sox and Cleveland are here to stay in a bad AL Central in the wild card. I think there's too many teams for the Red Sox to pass. I do believe the Red Sox should sell. I do believe the Red Sox should sell. And I came to that conclusion late last week. I want to stay on the Sox. You know what? We're not even going to take a commercial this hour. We're just going to keep going until 6 o'clock. You're going to hear me do something now that I haven't done a lot of. You're going to hear me now criticize Chaim Bloom. I'm a Chaim Bloom guy. I'm a Chaim Bloom defender. I've defended him a lot against a lot of backlash. Today, you are going to hear me criticize Chaim Bloom. I think that Chaim Bloom has made a mistake in how he's handled Nathan Eovaldi at this trade deadline. Nathan Eovaldi is scheduled to start tonight for the Red Sox against the Astros. I believe that that is a mistake. Nathan Eovaldi should not be taking the mound tonight. He should have already been traded. Once Luis Castillo was dealt to the Mariners on what I believe was Saturday night, on Saturday night, once Luis Castillo was dealt already, you knew the price for pitching. That's when Chaim Bloom should have pounced, and Nathan Eovaldi should have been dealt away. Nathan Eovaldi is a clear trade candidate, right? Aging pitcher, 1-year deal, free agent at the end of the year, Sox best pitching asset. They've got to move Eovaldi. They've got to move Eovaldi before tomorrow's deadline. But Nathan Eovaldi has an ERA of more than 11 in his last 3 starts. An ERA of more than 11 in his last 3 starts. So by letting Nathan Eovaldi pitch tonight, Chaim Bloom is taking a very calculated risk that I don't think is worth it. Chaim Bloom is saying if we put out Eovaldi tonight and he shuts down a great Astros lineup, well, then the asking price and the return for Eovaldi goes up. But I fear the opposite happening. I fear the Astros, who are excellent, pounding Eovaldi and the return going down even further. The Astros are great. Evaldi's got that ERA of 11 in his last 3 starts. Teams, he's getting hit at a hard hit rate at 42%, which is just absurd. Like, the Red Sox should sell. And when you sell, it's about maximizing assets. Chaim Bloom thinks, apparently, that starting Nathan Eovaldi tonight and showcasing him will maximize the return. I think it should have gone the other way. You maximize the return by not letting him get to this point. Because if he goes and gets shelled by Houston, and now that's 4 consecutive bad starts, then you've really impacted your ability to get a good return. Chaim Bloom, to me, made a mistake. Nathan Eovaldi should not be pitching tonight as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely should not be pitching. Castillo was dealt on Saturday night. At that point, you knew what the return could be. You knew the teams that were interested in pitching, and you knew how desperate teams would be to get starting pitching after Castillo was gone. And the teams that didn't think they could get Montas like the Yankees just did. Capitalize on that and don't let Eovaldi pitch against Houston. Because when he goes out today and he struggles, I think the return is going to be even worse. The Astros are excellent. Trust me, they've played the Mariners 7 times in the last 10 days, and they went 6-1 against them. I have watched the Astros for years, and I've watched the Astros this season just pulverize starting pitchers. The Astros are a top 10 team in doubles. The Astros are 3rd in baseball in home runs. The Astros are 6th in walks. They have the 3rd best record in all of baseball. Yordan Alvarez is the most feared hitter in the American League this side of Aaron Judge. They've won 6 of 10 since the All-Star break. This is just not a good matchup for Eovaldi. And if you are trying to maximize return on your assets, Chaim Bloom never should have let Nathan Eovaldi be listed as a starting pitcher in this game. It should have happened earlier. Tex says, and Houston just got Trey Mancini today also. I don't believe that Trey Mancini is going to be in the lineup today. It's not going to happen, so we're not going to have to worry about that. Sox catch a break. Alex Bregman is out also today. I believe his wife or girlfriend is pregnant and in labor, so he's gone today too. That helps the Red Sox, but Altuve, Gurriel, Alvarez, I mean, even the guys you don't expect, Myers and Matijevic, like all these guys for the Astros, they just hit. Jeremy Pena could win AL Rookie of the Year potentially. The Astros are really good, and Eovaldi hasn't been, and I just don't think that tonight is going to be a good night here for the Sox pitcher. I'm still trying to see exactly what, look, I'm refreshing Twitter every 2 seconds here, making sure that there are no Red Sox shockers here in the last 5 minutes. There are not, so no Red Sox big trades here in the last couple of minutes. So, yeah, the fact that Nathan Eovaldi is still starting, I'm not on board with that. It is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEV Radio.com. The Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line is open, 802-585-3026. Joe gets in on a couple of messages here who says, I put the blame on Chaim Bloom. He needs to step up and make some moves like the Yankees just did, reloading and making themselves stronger. Time to trade JD Martinez and maybe Xander need pitching bad. I would not trade Xander Bogaerts. I've said that. I've covered that. I'll leave that alone. But everybody else who's on a 1-year deal, I trade. Martinez, Eovaldi, Vasquez, and if anybody wants them, given their health concerns, Kike, Rich Hill, and Waka, they could all go too. They could all go also. I would trade them all. James Paxton, anybody who you might want that's on a 1-year deal, I will trade. Don't care. It's open season for me if I got a guy on a 1-year deal, with the exception, Ref Snyder, I'd move. With the exception of Bogaerts, I'd move everybody. A few other Sox-related trade notes. The Red Sox have reportedly brought a minor league catcher with them to Houston. Why is that important? They're anticipating the possibility of a Christian Vasquez trade. You don't just bring another catcher with you on your taxi squad unless you're planning on moving the one you've got. So be on the lookout for a Christian Vasquez trade by tomorrow. The Red Sox now have another option with them as far as potentially where to go if Vasquez is dealt. And Vasquez is in high demand this trade season. The Mets are interested. The Astros are interested, and I get why. After a slow start, Vasquez is hitting .282 this year, and in a league where no one at the catcher position really can hit, Vasquez can. He'd be of instant help to a team like the Astros, where Martin Maldonado is hitting .173 this year. So that's a possibility that Vasquez gets moved soon. There's also a rumor out there that Jackie Bradley Jr. could be on the move to Philadelphia. I don't know how realistic that is, but JBJ, I believe, has an option after this year. So essentially, he's a free agent, I believe. So I'd move him too, obviously, if somebody wants him. The Phillies are reportedly looking for defensive help in the outfield. There's the Dave Dombrowski connection there where he's in the front office with the Phillies now. So be on the lookout for that potentially. One other note, the Red Sox are said to be looking for major league players in return for their guys. That doesn't surprise me, but that seems too ambitious. That seems too ambitious for me. Like, we talk about the idea of the Red Sox buying and selling. So this idea that they're going to sell off JD Martinez to get two major league players that can come and help them still contend right now, that seems overly ambitious to me. I mean, this does happen, right? Like last year, I saw the Mariners trade Kendall Graveman, their closer, on an expiring deal, trade him to the Astros, and in that deal, they got 5 years of Abraham Toro. So, like, it does happen where you sell a guy and get a major league ready player back, but it's very hard to do that. If you are trading one of your guys to a contender, that contender clearly likes their guys. They're clearly liking to add to their roster. So the idea of getting them to subtract the guy with 4 or 5 years of team control to you from their big league roster, that is a hard thing to pull off. I don't see the Red Sox trading Christian Vasquez to the Astros and then pulling in Jake Myers, the outfielder, with 6 years left of team control. I just don't. The Astros have Jake Myers for a reason, and he plays for them for a reason. They like him. I just don't see that happening. If I'm Chaim Bloom, I'd be looking to find players in these deals that are close to the big leagues. They don't have to, in my mind, be ready-made big leaguers that you get. At least I don't see it that way. Acquire some players that are close, that are on the fringe to the big leagues, and then I think you've got an opportunity to, be interesting, right? You could spend a bunch of money in the offseason to go rebuild the major league roster. Maybe these prospects that you get this year can be ready by next spring training to come in and contribute. Maybe you can trade more of these prospects next offseason to go get more star caliber players. You acquire enough close to ready big major leaguers that next February you can go trade them. I don't know. But I think Chaim Bloom, if he's restricting himself to only looking for ready-made big leaguers, I think he's doing it wrong there. I think he's doing it wrong. So I think there's two things I have against Chaim Bloom today. But two things against him. Evaldi should not be pitching today, and he should lower his asking price. I would love to have major league players with 5 years of team control. I would. But it's rare. Go get top of the food chain minor leaguers that are close, and then next year you can either utilize them yourself or you can package up a bunch of them and trade them for a better player, for a better major league player. You can start to get it into the conversations, right? Mariners last year, Jesse Winker, Eugenio Suarez. They could do that because they had a deep farm system. You create more depth, maybe you can make that kind of deal next year. All right, it is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Let's check and see quick if anything else is cooking on the trade market. It doesn't appear to be right now. Let's take a look one more time here at another source here at MLB Trade Rumors and see exactly what the latest is. Nothing else right now. Just the Yankees again acquiring Scott Efros, a reliever from the Cubs, and getting Lou Trevino and Frankie Montas. And now the Yankees rotation: Garrett Cole, Jamison Tyone, Nestor Cortez, Jordan Montgomery, Luis Severino. Domingo Germán is there also. Severino is injured right now. Germán has been in his place. Montas then will take his spot, I'm sure. So Cole, Tyone, Cortez, Montgomery, and Montas. That's pretty good. It is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, WDEVradio.com. When we come back, I'll tell you about the group of people that want me fired, and we'll crowdsource to see if they've got a point about their biggest complaint.
This is WDEV, Vermont's news station, owned and operated by the Radio Vermont Group. From the top of Sugarbush, 96.1 FM, WDEV Warren and Waitsfield, 96.5 W243 Barrie, 98.3 W252 CU Montpelier, along with our founding station, AM 550 WDEV Waterbury Montpelier, streaming at WDEVradio.com. 91 years of serving Vermont, the friendly pioneer, WDEV.
This is CBS News on the Hour, presented by Liberty Mutual Insurance.
We are following breaking news out of Washington at this hour. U.S. officials now confirming that a key member of Al-Qaeda has been killed in Afghanistan. CBS's Stephen Portnoy has details from the White House.
Ayman al-Zawahiri became the leader of al-Qaeda upon the death of Osama bin Laden in the U.S. raid in 2011. Zawahiri had escaped numerous attempts on his life, and he managed to evade an international manhunt. The FBI says Zawahiri had a hand in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. His last appearance was in a video released in April. The president, who is again testing positive for COVID, is expected to announce the news to the country in a speech he'll deliver from the balcony off the White House Blue Room.
In the meantime, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now in Asia, and Taiwan is not off the table for a visit yet, despite warnings from China. National Security Spokesman John Kirby.
We and countries around the world believe escalation serves no one. Beijing's actions could have unintended consequences that only serve to increase tensions.
Kirby also confirmed today that the U.S. has approved another $550 million in aid for Ukraine. 37 people have now died in record flooding in Kentucky. Hundreds are still unaccounted for. Thousands don't have power, and homes there are crumbling. Sandy Banks is in Whitesburg, Kentucky.
This is the worst thing that's happened to me since my husband passed away 13 years ago. So I just feel kind of helpless. But I know God will take care of us.
But it could get even worse.
There is severe storm potential today in all of the impacted areas. That is just not right.
Governor Andy Beshear says another round of rain is hampering relief efforts. Out west, 54 wildfires are burning in 13 states, including a fast-moving fire in Northern California. CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti says that spread to more than 55,000 acres.
Officials are urging residents to take evacuation orders seriously. The sheriff's department confirming over the weekend they found 2 people dead in their car in their driveway. It appears they were overcome by flames.
A man convicted of storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6 got sentenced today to more than 7 years in prison. Guy Reffitt's daughters are not happy.
To mark my dad as this horrible person and then having him prosecuted like this when somebody is maybe even able to get elected again doesn't seem right to me.
Trump deserves life in prison if my father's in prison for this long.
Prosecutors say Reffitt and other members of his right-wing militia plan to drag House Speaker Nancy Pelosi out of the Capitol by her ankles. Dow lost 46 points. This is CBS News.
Liberty Mutual customizes your car and home insurance, so you only pay for what you need. Visit libertymutual.com to learn more.
Make your opinion heard by texting onto the Brady Farkas Show at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show right here on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Nothing brewing right now on the Red Sox trade front. We'll continue to monitor that as we move through the show here. Mark Schofield is going to join us from NFL Wire, and he covers the Patriots for Pat's Pulpit. He'll be with us here at about 6:30 to talk about what we've heard and seen out of Patriots training camp. You can get in on the Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line, 802-585-3026. And I also remind you to subscribe to our full show podcasts on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So I like to be transparent as a radio host, and I like to take opinion from the listeners. So a group of people essentially want me fired. Okay, a group of people emailed into the station. They essentially want me fired. But that leads me to something interesting. I want to do a bit of crowdsourcing, and I want to discuss what they've said here. Here's kind of just the background on the whole thing before we really get into it. A group of listeners who I believe to be older, it's not confirmed, but I believe them to be older, they messaged the boss and they gave an extremely detailed deep dive on all of our programming, not just me. They had comments on every hour of the day, all of our shows, weekdays, weekends, all of it. They declared the Brady Farkas Show the most useless show on radio and suggest that I be replaced by any alternative programming. That was basically their suggestion. Anything but this show, anything but me. They complained that I talk too much national sports. They said no one cares about the national stuff. They said they basically only care about local sports in high schools. And if I'm not going to talk about that, then to hell with everything else that I talk about. That's essentially what they said. I'm paraphrasing. But I got to thinking because I had a message last week from a listener who said, why don't I talk about Norwich more? So it kind of just got me thinking, and I want to have that discussion, and I want to crowdsource a bit. But first off, the email doesn't bother me. So if anybody out there is worried about how I feel about this, don't be. I've always said my job is to be entertaining. As a radio host, my job is to be entertaining, and my job is to get reactions out of our listeners and to get you to think. Love me or hate me, if I have made you think, then I feel like I've done my job. You don't have to agree, but that is where I am coming from. Okay, you don't have to agree with me, but that's where I'm coming from. When you listen to this show, I want you to feel something. Maybe you walk away and you're like, damn, Brady's a smart guy. That makes a lot of sense. Maybe you're yelling at your TV that I'm an idiot, but if I'm making you think, I feel like I'm doing a good job. And I genuinely mean this. This is not just a line that I'm going to drop here. I also think that any listener, or in this case, a group of listeners, any listener that reaches out and takes the time out of their day to reach out and send an email the length of this one, they really care about this station, and I really appreciate that. I love what I do. I love radio, and I want local radio to be profitable and successful, and I want it to be around for a long time, and I want to be a part of it for a long time. So if you are invested enough in our station to reach out like that, then you are a great radio listener, and we need more of you. So the sentiment, the stuff about me, that doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. I get bothered by what I see on social media about me more than I do that email. So I am okay. But now, really to the point at hand. To the point of subject matter, of things that we talk about on this show, I want to talk rationally, and I want to crowdsource with you on the Napa Morrisville, Napa Waterbury text line, 802-585-3026, okay? My goal on this show is to talk about things that have the most appeal to the biggest population of our listeners. Remember, our listeners are across the entire state of Vermont. WDEV has a signal that covers nearly our entire state. We're also into New Hampshire. We're also into a pretty good portion of northern New York as well. So my goal is to talk about topics that bring the most people into the conversation and are of the most interest to the most people. I want that group of people, all of Vermont, some in New Hampshire, all of northern New York, I want them to all be interested in what we're talking about. So from a subject matter perspective, what is it that we all have in common? Predominantly, it's the pro sports teams that we care about. The email said I talk too much national sports. I would argue I don't talk a lot of national sports. We're not talking, this show, 38 minutes in, we have not talked about Deshaun Watson yet today. We have not talked about LeBron or Kawhi Leonard or Zion or anything else you will hear on national sports talk radio. I haven't mentioned the Dallas Cowboys yet. So I don't think that I talk a lot of national sports. I talk a ton of regional sports. The fans in New England, of which that is nearly all of our listenership, are largely Red Sox fans, largely Patriots fans, largely Celtics fans, and largely Bruins fans. There are Yankee fans, there are Giant fans, there are Jet fans, and we will dive into some of those teams as well. And by talking about the Red Sox, by extension, we talk about the Yankees sometimes as well. So that is in part why I talk so much regional sports. It is, to me, the biggest uniter of us all. And again, I want your comments on this. 802-585-32. I wouldn't have brought this up if I didn't want to hear from you. I'm just telling you my rationale of why we talk about what we talk about on this show. To me, the regional sports teams are our biggest uniter. It's the thing we all have the most in common with. And then secondly, we are partners with the Red Sox and Patriots. I am under no mandate or obligation to talk about them at all. But I do believe it to be good business to promote the things and teams that we carry. That's just smart business. We're tying our brand into them. I would like their brands to be tied in with us. I think that is good business. Next, I think UVM is a unifier largely across the state of Vermont. It's the only Division I school in the state. If we had 14 Division I schools, I'd be talking about different things. I wouldn't talk about UVM as much because there'd be a lot more competition. It'd be a lot more of a niche fan base. It's not a niche fan base. UVM has no competition at the D1 landscape. So if you are invested at all in college sports, there's a good chance you are invested at least a little bit in UVM. Again, it's another common unifier for us. A lot of people invested in Ben Shungut, the Vermonter performing well. The point guard, Catherine Gilwey on the UVM women's team, the Vermonter doing well. A lot of you are invested there. The whole state is invested when UVM gets to the NCAA tournament. That's why we've talked about it in basketball and women's soccer and women's lacrosse and men's lacrosse. And we're all interested in the rebirth of men's hockey. And the whole state is interested, at least to a degree, in what the women's hockey team has done. This is a unifier. It's the only Division I sports program in the state. So therefore, we all at least rally around it to a degree. That is the reason why I talk about UVM as much as I do. My goal is to talk about things that unite us. If it was only about what I wanted to talk about, we'd be talking about minor league baseball prospects, and we'd talk more about jerseys. Those are things I'm interested in, but it doesn't unify any of you. It doesn't unify any of you. Phil says, Brady, you don't talk about national sports at all. I don't know, Phil, if you think that's good or bad, but yes, largely I don't. Unless there is a local tie-in, I don't talk about national sports. Okay, DK Metcalf signed a 3-year, $70 million deal with the Seahawks the other day. Do you care? I care as a Seahawks fan, but do you care enough for me to bring it to this show? No. Kyler Murray signed a 5-year, $230 million deal with the Cardinals. We didn't talk about it once. The only reason I will talk about it is because that's what you need to start thinking that Mac Jones might get in the future. That kind of money, and do you want to pay it? So I'm not going to talk about national sports unless there is a local tie-in or a regional tie-in. That's just how I've always felt. Another text says Red Sox, Pats, Celtics, Bruins are regional, and yes, national also, but you do provide entertaining, informative, useful, and fun, and you lead into Red Sox coverage all summer and a great respite for current events. So we're fortunate to have the Brady Farkas show, and I hope WDEV agrees. Oh, WDEV agrees. This is not me pleading to keep my job. I thought it was funny to say that this group wanted to be fired, but I do like crowdsourcing and explaining my rationale. I think that that's fair. You are invested in this show. I'm invested in what you think of this show. I'm at least going to tell you kind of my thought process here. And now that I have a full 90 minutes to do it, I can have this talk without it taking away from a lot of the other sports news of the day. So here's the one other thing I want to talk about. Okay, the question I get often, the question I got in this email, why do you not talk about high school sports more? Fair question. I've been asked it a lot. Why do you not talk about high school sports more? To me, the high school sports stuff is generally not a unifier. And to me, in my opinion, it is a tune-out generally to most of our audience. That is what I think. So when you ask me why don't I talk a lot about high school sports, that's why. I think most people tune out at that hyper local. And here's what I mean. If I spend 6 minutes on South Burlington against Essex football, who outside of those communities cares? Does the guy in Waterbury care about Essex versus South Burlington? Probably not. Does the woman in the Northeast Kingdom care, or the guy in Brattleboro? Probably not. Okay? It never seems smart to me to go and talk about topics where most of my audience doesn't care and will leave. That's how I've always felt. If I talk about a hyper-local thing, it needs to have broad appeal, right? It needs to have broader appeal than just its local community. The skier at Harwood, is that of huge interest to the guy at Missisquoi? Is the bowler in Highgate of great interest to the listener in Bennington? My guess to that is probably not. I like to talk about things that have a big picture appeal. Jacob Grout, the old hockey coach at Harwood, got fired. We spent a week on that because every community in the state could relate to that. Every community in the state could relate to a coach in their district, to parents having too much control, to parents being too hypersensitive, to how a coach's conduct could be. We spent a week on that because, to me, that was relatable to everyone. The guy who was allowed to coach Harwood boys hockey in the state title game after his second alleged DUI, mass appeal, because we could all ask how you'd feel if that was your hometown. Owen Kellington getting drafted, being the highest drafted Vermonter ever, to me, that had mass appeal because it was so rare. It was a unifier. Ellie Perrier St. Pierre, from Montgomery, Vermont, running in the Olympics, so rare it has mass appeal. Michaela Schifrin, Burke Mountain Academy product, racing at the Olympics, being a medal finalist, and then failing at the Olympics. That to me had mass appeal around this state. Those are all stories with local ties that we spent a ton of time on because they were relatable to everybody. I remember talking for a whole day about changing up high school sports basketball seedings or high school playoff seedings and how they should be done, how things should be handled during COVID when it came to high school sports. So I think that this show talks about local sports when it has a more broad-based appeal. The kid who scores 5 goals in one town's high school, that is interesting to that town. I don't know that is interesting to everybody else in the state. Owen Kellington, I know, is interesting to everybody in the state. Ellie Perrier, I know, is interesting. Amanda Pelkey, I know, is interesting. I don't know that the hyper-local is interesting. So that is why I don't talk a lot of high school. I'll bring on experts, right? Alex Abrami, the Free Press, comes on this show. He will come on this show again in a month, I promise you, and he will give us the high school football lowdown. And that will be one day in 10 minutes, and we'll kind of hit everything. But the idea that we're going to go and it's got to be extra special. For the high school kid who throws for 400 yards, we're going to bring that guy on. We are. But I just have never thought that such a one-town or two-town topic was appealing to the whole audience. That's just my thought. Okay, this is my rationale. I would love to hear your takes on it. If you really want me to do 6 minutes breaking down, Orwell football or, Fairhaven against South Burlington, we could do that, but I don't know that has mass appeal. I am curious. What if that's something you want on the day-to-day front? I joke that group of people wanted me fired. They really do want me replaced with anything else but this show. But as for why I don't talk about high school sports, which is a question I get a lot, it's a fair one. That is my answer. It's not a unifier. I could be better with Norwich hockey. I admit. Texter reached out last week and said, hey, don't forget about Norwich. I don't forget about Norwich. I used to work at Norwich. I like Norwich. I know the people there. I know all the coaches personally. I could be better talking about Norwich. But as for why I don't talk about high schools, that's generally my thought. Texter says, I don't really want to listen about high school sports. I'll be honest. Okay, that's one opinion. For me, it's not that I don't even want to hear about it. It's just I just don't think it's interesting to our entire audience. Brady, I'm glad you're on the radio. I've enjoyed listening to you since days at your old station, and I'm glad that WDEV picked you up. I've been listening for years, and I always listened to Lee when he used to do a sports show back in the day. I'm glad there's a sports show on DEV, and thank you for all you do in the sports world. Thank you very much. That's a very nice message as well. You know, the high school sport, look, I came up. It's funny. This is ironic. When I was in Albany, I came up talking high school sports. I was like the high school sports guy. Now, I was younger. I was 25, so I was closer to high school. My brother was 18. He was in high school, so I knew all these people. So I had an interest in bringing their stories to the light. And I championed hard to get high school sports on our radio shows. And I just kept getting told, no one's interested, no one's interested, no one's interested. And I kept fighting it. I'm like, what do you mean? This guy had 28 points yesterday. This guy's going for 1,000 in his career. What do you mean no one's interested? No one's interested, Brady. No one's interested, I promise you. It took me years to realize, not that no one's interested. That's not fair to say. But the Harwood girls basketball player who goes for 18 is not of interest to me if I'm in Missisquoi. The Missisquoi player who scores 4 goals and has a hat trick is not as interesting to me if I'm in Bennington. The Patriots, Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, UVM, they are the unifiers. And that is why I've chosen to talk about them more. So that's my rationale. And I'm glad that the email came out when it did so that I could explain that. Because I know that there are people who ask and wonder the same thing. I see the messages on the text line. Why not more high school? That's why. And you can continue to get your thoughts in on that. If you want a local story, I'll tell you, there's a great local story that I mentioned on the midday news service today about Elise Berger, the CVU high school student who is playing currently with the USA women's baseball national team. We're going to do, I think that story has mass appeal. We're going to do that at the end of the show or near the end of the show for about 6 to 8 minutes. It's a great story. Elise Berger, a 16-year-old from CVU, playing on the national team, Team USA women's baseball. I think that story has mass appeal. I'm also going to tell the story later about how awful I was in men's league baseball yesterday. Like I could have been worse, but not much worse. That's for sure. Scott says, Brady, love your show. Much more interested in pro sports and guests discussing the pros. Well, thank you very much, Scott. So far, everybody on the text line is, everybody on the text line is where we're, kind of agreeing with me. So let's see. No other big baseball news right now. Austin Riley of the Braves signs a 10-year, $212 million contract extension. That is about 5 minutes old, but that's it. Nothing else there on the trade front. So we'll see if anything happens, but I don't think anything's going to happen Red Sox wise now before the game. Like I don't think anything's going to happen before the game tonight now. So I think Evaldi is going to make that start today. I think he is going to make that start. I disagree with it, but I think he is going to make it. All right, a couple other things here before I get to commercial break. Oh, real quick, did you see Christian Vasquez yesterday? The players know what's happening around the trade deadline. And Vasquez was asked, do you think that Chaim Bloom believes in this team? And he said, I don't know. I saw people getting on Chaim Bloom whoa, the players are revolting. I'm like, look, I think that quote's getting too much play where Vasquez is I don't know. Well, I think Chaim Bloom believes in this Red Sox team at its best. I do. This Red Sox team is not at its best. It's a shell of itself. There's belief and there's reality. And the reality is, the belief is that, hey, when Devers is healthy and Story's healthy and Sale's healthy, we're pretty damn good. The reality is everybody's hurt and the team is close to out of it. And the schedule is one of the hardest in baseball. This Red Sox team is not going anywhere. So when Vasquez is upset that, when Vasquez is upset that it appears like they don't believe in him, I'm not buying that because this team, there's belief in it when it's all healthy. The Red Sox right now have the fourth hardest schedule in baseball remaining. Fourth hardest schedule in baseball. There's belief and there's reality. Okay, there's belief and there's reality. Speaking of belief and reality, everybody here seems to really, really believe in Mac Jones. You love Mac Jones. Mac Jones is the promise, taking us to the promised land. Mac Jones is the chosen one. Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady. I don't think that's reality. Who's right? All of you or me? Pat's insider Mark Schofield is with us next on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM and FM.
Red cedar and hemlock clapboards are available at Cleveland Cedar Products in Woken. They have many hard-to-find siding products. Don't let fall weather slow your siding project. Let Cleveland